This one's my take on the classic synth DIY sequencer called the Baby-8. I made a prototype last year where I built it using point-to-point soldering, but this time I decided to design a PCB for it. It has a clock input, a reset input, and buttons to manually control both of those. The number of steps can be selected using a step knob. It has a CV output, of course, and a gate output that could be controlled by these toggle switches. I know it's a bit of a stretch to call this a mini module at 16 HP, but I wanted to stick with the theme of my series while still keeping the module fun to play with. A sequencer, I think, is something that needs a bit more ergonomics, and a little space between the controls really helps with that. For the buttons, I decided to use mechanical key switches usually used for keyboards. I've been using them on my point-to-point builds, and I like them much better than the 7x7 switch that I used on my recent PCB builds. They're a bit bigger, but since this build has enough space for it, I decided to try it out. KiCad already had a default footprint for it, so I didn't have to make my own. I forgot to talk about this one in the burst module, but I've been using this SR16 rotary switch whenever I need to switch between 8 options. It works just like a toggle switch, but instead of just 2 options, you get 8. KiCad didn't have symbols and footprints for this, so I decided to make one myself. To do that, I used the symbol editor to make the symbol used for the schematics. For the footprint, I used the footprint editor. I used this datasheet as reference for the dimensions. This can now be found on my Benjao Modular KiCad library on GitHub. The rest of the build was pretty standard. Just like my previous builds, I used Inkscape to draw the labels for the front panel. I then exported my drawings to PNG and then imported them into KiCad. I worked on the circuit layout and then sent over my files to PCBWay, who sponsored this project. PCBWay has been my go-to PCB manufacturer for my projects. You can find my entire mini-synth series on their website. I'll add a link in the description. I still have some issues I have to address before I upload this one there, but I'll post an update soon. Thank you PCBWay for sponsoring my projects. Now let's talk about some issues that I've encountered in this first PCB prototype for my Baby-8 sequencer. First of all, I placed the diodes in the wrong spot, so the module didn't run at all. Good thing I've been learning how to carve wood blocks, so I got to use my newly acquired knife skills to cut some traces. Then I had to wire it up correctly using point-to-point soldering, which wasn't so bad. I decided to add some transistors to each step to make it more reliable. In my earlier prototype, I didn't have these and I noticed that some steps can affect the others. I got this idea from Eddie Bergman's blog. I also used the wrong footprint for the regulator. I used this smaller D-pack footprint instead of the bigger one that the component I bought came in. To fix this, I also temporarily dead-bugged a through-hole transistor in its place. Another major issue that I had was more of an ergonomic one. I placed the toggles for the gates a little too close to the knobs, so it made it difficult to flip. I also placed the toggles in the wrong direction. The on position was pointing down instead of up, which I feel is more natural. It's no big deal, I simply had to do a new version. I already addressed most of the issues that I've talked about. Once I'm done with this, I'll send over another set of files to PCBWay for printing. After I confirm that my changes work, I'll share my files again, as always, in case you want to have copies of this module yourself. Like the rest of my modular synth series, everything will be open source. That would be all for now. If you like what I do and would like to help me fund my work, please consider being a monthly supporter on my Ko-fi page. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next video.